Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. We're streaming on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Everybody like, share, subscribe, click that bell so that you can be notified when we go live. You don't want to miss these conversations. And if you want to catch up with me on Twitter, X. I'm at Santita J. I'm trying to keep up, everybody. And then, of course, Santita Jackson and Friends on Facebook for the old fogies like me. But everybody, if you want to see and hear and interact with the Santita Jackson Morning Stars, please go to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel and the Santita Jackson and Friends page, but the YouTube channel is where you really need to be. Santita Jackson Show. As we talk about in the second hour, the price that South Africa is paying for confronting Western imperialism. Naledi Pandor, who is one of the South African ministers, has accused the Israeli intelligence of going after her and her family, making her pay and making South Africa pay for taking them to the ICJ. What about that? But right now, let's talk about Listen to Michigan. We are in the midst of what might be the most exciting contest thus far on the Democratic side on the presidential primary. Michiganders are asking, or they're presenting another option to Michigan voters for people who are quite invested in ceasefire in the Middle East, in Palestine, who are quite invested in peace, in justice. Well, you're calling for a ceasefire. The president thus far has not done that. And many people are saying, what are we going to do? Well, Michiganders have come up with a solution. We're going to see if it's going to work. It's been taking off. And so we've got joining Ari Bloom-Katz, executive editor of In These Times magazine. I urge you to become a subscriber. They need your support. InTheseTimes.com. Go on and become a subscriber. It's some of the best reading you're going to, investigative reporting you're going to see. Noted social scientist Dwight McKee, dean of the Ma'afa Redemption Project. He is also senior advisor to Dr. Cornel West, presidential candidate. We've got Jonah Karsh, who'll be coming on in a hot second. And Jonah is from If Not Now, this exciting group of young Jewish activists who are pushing against apartheid in Israel and pushing for justice and freedom. But let's get to you, Lexis Zaidan, our special guest today, spokesperson for the Listen to Michigan campaign. So glad that you are with us today. What are you doing in Michigan? Governor Whitmer has said you're going to help Trump. What are you doing?
Yeah, so, well, thank you for having me. Very excited to be on this platform and just sharing, Listen to Michigan. It's a coalition of folks right now, multi-generational, multiracial, multi-faith, and all very anti-war, working towards a society that is pro-peace. And so, to combat the statements of our governor saying that, a vote that we don't cast for Biden is a vote that goes to Trump. The Listen to Michigan campaign is in fact a strategy that is currently challenging Biden and his administration on their current stance in both aiding and abetting in the ongoing genocide in Gaza. And, to make very clear, we have 80% of Democrats right now that are asking and calling for an immediate and permanent ceasefire, and only 4% of our Congress that are actually listening to their constituents. And so more than anything else, the Listen to Michigan Vote Uncommitted strategy is a strategy that's been born out of anger and frustration to get the administration to hear their constituents and to make choices that are in alignment with both our democratic values and what it is that their constituents want. And what you're seeing is our Congress, alongside our president and his administration, are choosing to remain loyal to a foreign country such as Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu, where they are willing to risk our entire democracy. At this point, it's not the voters that are handing this over to Trump. It is the decisions that Biden and his administration has made for the last 5 months, 130 plus days now, that could potentially hand this presidency over to Trump.
So what are you asking people to do? And I've asked this question of Listening to Michigan before, but since we are really on the eve of the primary, give people instructions if they want to support this campaign, what it is that they should be doing.
Yeah, so obviously Listen to Michigan, it's a movement that is impacting Michigan voters across the state only. And what we're doing is we're asking people to go to the polls on February 27th pull a Democratic ticket and to vote uncommitted as a way to send a resounding message to Biden and his administration that he can count Michigan out for genocide and count Michigan out for the way that they've been aiding and abetting in the ongoing genocide that's happening in Gaza.
So when they vote uncommitted, what does that mean? And what does that mean for the delegate count? What does that mean for the upcoming convention?
Yeah, so voting uncommitted ultimately, it's both a symbolic vote and could be a potential numbers game here, where when you vote uncommitted, you're ultimately telling the Democratic Party, Biden and his administration, that we're uncommitted to right now. As we all know, the primaries serve as a pulse check for both the Republican and the Democratic Party to be able to determine what it is, where is it that constituents or citizens are currently sitting on the scale of either Republican or Democrat. And we all know that Michigan is a key swing state in the election. And typically the way that Michigan swings is the way that the White House will ultimately end up. And so, if you get enough votes, I think it's 15% of the votes, it's enough to send a delegate to the DNC as an uncommitted delegate. And furthermore, I think that the uncommitted vote is serving as potentially a numbers game here, where if we get enough people, we're really going to put, some concern back on the White House or on the Biden and his administration. We are anticipating or aiming for a 10,000 minimum vote goal, where Trump won the election by 10,000 votes in 2016. And so that's a margin of victory to play with, to show that if we get 10,000 votes, we could take control of the way the state swings. We anticipate more. I'd say if we landed 50,000, that's a huge win. 70,000, Biden should be pretty concerned, and anything above that, Biden and his team should start to run and strategize very quickly, because that number is showcasing that there is a number of individuals within Michigan right now that are willing to remain uncommitted until his administration and himself chooses to prioritize peace in this country and start to really advocate for an anti-war stance.
We're talking with Lexis Zaidan, spokesperson for Listen to Michigan. The primary is February 27th. It's today, everybody. How will you be voting in Michigan? How will you let the president know what your thoughts are on Palestine, on the ceasefire? People are calling for it, as you said, Lexis. More than 80% of Democrats want a ceasefire, but no one's listening. Only 4% of Congress have signed on. And the person who is spearheading that effort, Cori Bush, is facing a daunting challenge from an AIPAC sponsored candidate in St. Louis, Missouri. And so, the squad who have been your champions in the Congress, they are really under attack. I mean, what do you expect? How do you expect to see this play out at the state convention in Michigan, which, is a very, very powerful and quite active affair? And then maybe the national convention come August.
Listen, I think there's two ways that this could ultimately play out. Is, if the protest vote is impactful, and if Biden and his administration choose to wake up and to listen and heed the demands of what we are calling for, the ultimate goal is to have it lead to a ceasefire. As a reminder, it's a protest vote strictly trying to get Biden and his administration to call for an immediate and permanent ceasefire. Under this campaign, you have, it's not a monolith. You have people that have already abandoned Biden completely. They feel as though you cannot ask them to re-elect a person that has murdered 30,000 innocent lives. And there's another group of folks under the same strategy that are waiting for him to change course, to potentially to back him. I know there's been a lot of conversation about no matter what, he will be the nominee. There's an opportunity in which the Democratic Party might wake up and say, listen, Biden might not be our guy. Like that, this might not be the right choice to make when it comes to our nominee, when it comes to the convention. And so I think it could play out two different ways in that regard. Actually getting the ceasefire called, and then, in my own personal capacity, I will not be voting for Trump, I won't be voting for Trump. I also will not be voting for Biden. And I think that there is a huge role that the down ballot election can play right now. And this is the conversation I'm having with voters, is we are so hyper focused on the presidential election. And the unfortunate reality is, whether Trump or Biden, they're terrible options for our society and our democracy. And that there's some opportunity to leverage and still save what's left of our democracy through the down ballot vote. Local elections matter. You have some of our biggest voices, such as Cori Bush and Rashida Tlaib and AOC and Ilhan Omar. And locally in Michigan, you have Alabas Farhat, Abraham Ayash, our own mayor, who are acting courageously and, really speaking up for a ceasefire and for a free Palestine. And so I think having a lot of conversations and really seeing a lot of shift in narrative in terms of either people running for re-election or people that are trying to get newly elected into these seats and really advocating for a pro-peace, anti-war stance.
How empowering has this been for this multiracial coalition, which Michigan, quite honestly, is famous for? When you all want to pull together across racial lines and class lines, you do. And how empowering has this been for the Arab American community? Because there was a time not too long ago, 40 years ago, you would not see Arab money accepted for contributions in presidential campaigns, and you've gone from that 40 years ago to this.
Listen, I was telling somebody the other day that what Biden and his administration expected, particularly from the Arab American and Muslim community, but really Michigan in general, is that they expected us to forget. They expected that they could kill 30,000 of our people and that we wouldn't be held accountable. And as much as we've been grieving, as exhausted as we are, what we've done is, at the very least, we've defied this notion that he thought we would forget, and we've actually mobilized people. We've raised money and we've mobilized people behind a campaign that, while we might not see the direct impact short term, this is going to have huge ripple effects long term. And what we hope to see is that we're sick and tired of making short-sighted decisions. I said to somebody earlier in an interview that you can't kill 30,000 of our people and then come back ahead of elections and ask 30,000 plus people to then support you from that same community. It truly is beyond me. It's both dehumanizing. It's a dehumanizing act to ask us for our votes. And so I think, in a sense, that the vote uncommitted is truly an inspiration, because what you're seeing us being able to mobilize in a strategic way that could have initial and short-sighted results, but also long-term impacts when it comes to the 2028 elections and what the Democratic Party is going to have to do in order to appeal to the Arab American and Muslim community.
Well, project out. How do you think this is going to change the Democratic Party and, quite frankly, the Republican Party's relationship with the Arab American community?
Listen, I said this before, they've constantly used us as a pawn to win their elections, and we're no longer pawns. We're both knights and queens when it comes to the chess game of politics. And what I mean by that is, we can either be a threat to your election, or you can understand what we want and heed our demands to be able to win your election. And it's on the Democratic Party to really take us seriously. And again, this might not be a short-term reaction, but long-term, this is how it will have to play out.
We've got Jonah Karsh from If Not Now. We've got Mark Fancher, brilliant civil libertarian, National Conference of Black Lawyers, Dwight McKee, social scientist. Let me start with you, Ari Bloom-Katz, executive editor in These Times Magazine. Your magazine has invested a lot of energy. What have you been hearing from Lexus Zaidan?
Well, first off, thanks so much for having me on, and great to be with everybody else. Dwight, Mark, Jonah, and Lexus, thank you so much for all your work and for everything you shared here. One of the things that this makes me think about is there's this question that's going around right now, and in part it's because of articles like one that I ran that asked, has Biden completely lost Michigan? And this question, has Biden lost Michigan? Has Biden lost this? I've been thinking that maybe the question needs to be posed a bit differently. And the question is, what has Biden done to win Michigan? What has Biden done to win all of the states that he needs to win in order to win the presidency? And I think that one of the things we're seeing in Michigan is that this is not a fringe movement. This is not a fringe movement in Michigan or anywhere else in the country. That voters are showing a deep discontent with Biden and with the overall situation, and are looking for an option to vote their conscience and still participate in our electoral democracy. And that's a really interesting thing that I think is happening right now, is this uncommitted campaign in Michigan, and if it's able to spread elsewhere across the nation, is allowing voters the opportunity to still participate in our electoral democracy while still voting their conscience. And that's a really, really critical thing that's happening. It is not a fringe movement. And I think it would be a real mistake to look at this as just something that's happening in Michigan, just something that is inherent to the demographics and population of Michigan. I think that what's happening in Michigan is largely representative of a huge swath of the country and a huge swath of voters in this country right now. And, Lexus, one of the things that you mentioned about the Biden administration needing to take Michigan voters seriously, I think is so critically on point. And this is what we're seeing across the country is voters who are coming up to the polls and saying, Biden, you need to take us seriously. And, we even saw this in New Hampshire with what was not a hugely, organized campaign for a write-in for ceasefire that still got a decent percentage of folks. And we saw that. And so this, also raises questions about some of the other candidates that are in the Democratic primary or who have been in the Democratic primary, including, folks like Dean Phillips. A question has to be, if some of these other candidates were running on a more solid ceasefire platform, what sorts of percentages might they be gaining right now? Like, would they be representative on this as well? And so I think, there's a lot of questions there, but overall, the sense that we're getting at in these times, the sense that my colleagues who are, across the country at other publications, is that this is not a fringe movement. This is not a fringe feeling. This is absolutely something that has not only taken hold, but has real momentum right now, and is really showing us a lot about the moral conviction of so many folks in the country.
Lexus, and I think before I pivot to you, Jonah, and to you, Mark, and to you, Dwight, I think what Michiganders have done is help to return agency to the Democratic voters. We felt that we've been pushed up against the wall. It's Biden or no one. And what you're showing us is that people have power. There is people power, and we have options, and we also have opinions. And because of big money in politics, our representatives are not representing us. And we have a president who's not listening. Talk to us about that, because this is, to me, it's ceasefire is huge, but it really is, as you said, about the Democratic Party. It's about the democracy and the republic itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it on the head, right? In terms of, really reinstilling or inspiring people around the concept of voting. When, we started having conversation, I saw voter apathy happen within my community of like them saying, I'm not going to the ballots. Why am I going to go to the ballots? Like, we go to the ballots, we vote for people, and we end up getting burned in the end. And that's a real sentiment, and it's a real feeling. And so all about political organizing and strategizing is, if you truly care about the people, how do you bring their feelings and their emotions and then mobilize them to actually utilize those feelings and emotions in a very simple, clear, concise way to send a very clear message? And that's exactly what Vote Uncommitted does. It lets them know kind of what Ari was saying is like, you could still use your right to vote and also engage in a morally conscious decision to not feel like you got to go to the ballot box and check off Trump and or Biden and feel like you're betraying your people, but using your right to vote to let them know that you're uncommitted because you do not stand for how they're currently engaging. And it's part of getting behind a movement that attaches the vote to the mission and the statement, which is exactly what Vote Uncommitted does. Is it doesn't create a senseless opportunity to go to the polls and cast a vote that doesn't have like an actual impact, but it's casting the vote behind a message that's letting people get behind that message to send that to both Biden and his administration on how they're feeling. And I think that's exactly what's happening here. Voter apathy, but still trying to ensure that, don't lose the power of your vote, and let's continue to mobilize in a way that has hopefully long lasting impact.
And Jonah, this is helping us to see, as you just said, Lexus, how we can use our vote. I mean, now I feel like, wait a minute, there's something I can do when the primary comes to me. Jonah.
Yeah, one thing I want to point out with regards to that is the potential impact of this down the road. I think everything good that has ever happened, that our government has ever done in the history of this country, has happened because people demanded it. As Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand. Today in the Democratic Party, you will be exiled from the Democratic Party if you do not support reproductive freedoms for women, people who can get pregnant. That is because there's an organized grassroots movement of people that demanded that from their political leaders and said, this is our red line. You're not going to get my vote if you don't agree to that. And what we're seeing right now, historically, on the issue of Israel-Palestine in the Democratic Party, groups like AIPAC try to basically prevent an open discourse on this issue. They can take a congressperson on a trip to Israel. They can give them a ton of campaign donations and threaten to spend big against them with a primary opponent if they say anything remotely critical of Israel. And they're successful over time, in part because this because they've been able to capture the debate, and it's not an issue that historically there's been enough counter grassroots mobilization on. And now what we're seeing is people are dying in Gaza. We've had 30,000 people killed, 12,000 children at least. I haven't checked the latest numbers, but it's just unconscionable. And of course, people are going to say, how can I support someone to be the next nominee when I have a choice to try to make it somebody else who's killed all these people? And what I think it is a demonstration of grassroots power. It's a demonstration that going forward, AIPAC is not going to control our discourse. And the base of the Democratic Party, we see 80% of Democratic voters want a ceasefire, is going to demand over time that any person who wants our vote is going to have to respect human rights both at home and around the world in Palestine. It doesn't stop at our borders. And I'm so inspired by the Vote Uncommitted campaign in Michigan, because I see it as an opportunity to both to stand for justice, take a principled stand, but also in the long term to open up and democratize the discourse on Israel-Palestine in our Democratic Party.
Attorney Mark Fancher, this resonates quite deeply in the Black community, and I think in the global South, because Indigenous people everywhere have dealt with the brutalization of Western imperialism. And what do you make of this particular campaign? There's a real pushback, and we're seeing it internationally with South Africa, but we're seeing it right here on the ground in Michigan.
Yeah, I share the excitement about all of this, looking at it through the lens of a revolutionary. Um, and, unlike someone who approaches this with excitement because they anticipate that this will give them an opportunity to try and make the political establishment respond, or to do things that are responsive to the will of the people, I don't believe any of that. I don't think that they're going to respond. If they do something, it won't be because of what we do with the uncommitted campaign. But what I am excited about is the fact that, like any revolutionary, I don't look at how I can force the people to go in a particular direction. The most that a revolutionary can do is to look at where they know the people are going and help them to get there a little bit faster, or to make the way, to pave the way for them, to help them to get there. And there are certain bases that people on the broad mass level have to touch before they get where I personally think that they need to be. Just to give you an example, some decades ago, if you walked into any Black community and you said that you offered them the prospect of electing a Black mayor, they would become wildly excited about it. They would, oh man, if we can elect a Black mayor, we're going to be free. And they'd get real jazzed about it. Decades after that, we've had hundreds and hundreds of Black mayors. And if you suggest to any Black person that electing a Black mayor is going to lead to liberation, then you'll get laughed at. We know the experience there. The same thing was true for a long time when it was suggested that if you elect a Black president, then many people thought, oh, well, then we have achieved liberation now if we do that. And now we've had Obama, and people have learned from it. They know that it doesn't matter the color of the president, that the president within the existing system has a job description, and they have to carry it out. And it's to preserve the empire. It's to preserve capital for the capitalists. And so that's not a path to liberation either. I think we're in a similar situation now. I mean, all of those things are good. Electing Black mayors was good. Electing Obama was good because it helped people's consciousness to rise. And I think that we're in another pivotal moment now when people are recognizing the power that they have with this campaign. The question really is, what do the people on a mass level perceive to be the best use of that power? Is it to continue to think that we use that power for purposes of trying to make a system which is programmed to be anti-people to respond to the needs of people? Or do we grow a little bit politically, become more politically mature, and say that what we need to do is to reject the entire system and among ourselves, the broad masses of the people, create our own system, create something that's an alternative to this entire thing, start from scratch and build something that is truly democratic, not just politically, but economically and socially and otherwise. And that's where I think that people are going. They're not going to jump to that, but touching this base is really, really important. And I think flexing the people's muscle with this campaign is going to make a lot of people wake up in many ways. When it does not necessarily result in a ceasefire, then they're going to have to go back and think about what does that mean? Why didn't it work? And what is it that we really need to do with our power?
Well, you know, and Lexus, I'm trying to be sensitive to the fact I wanted to bring Dwight McKee in, but I'm trying to be sensitive to the fact that this is the last few minutes before. I mean, as you're trying to see and touch voters, and you said that you know, because your time was limited, and I absolutely respect that. Is there anything left on the table that you'd like to say?
Yeah, I just kind of want to elevate both Jonah and Mark, what they were discussing, particularly in relation to, the way our current democracy operates and our elected system. And, Mark hit it on the head. Under Barack Obama, we actually signed the largest aid package to Israel of $38 billion. And at the end of the day, the truth is, as long as we keep money in politics, we're going to continue in this cycle of capitalism and fascism and elitism. And, kind of what Jonah was saying is this movement that we're creating is ultimately sparking a conversation that's been very taboo to discuss. As a Palestinian, you mentioned Israel, Palestine, you're on Canary Mission and you're being doxxed on public websites and potentially not getting jobs or getting into schools. And now what you're doing is you're forcing the hand of people in general to be able to have the conversation. That's an uncomfortable conversation to have, but a conversation that needs to be had in order for us to move towards peace and justice. And, part of what I believe is, I'm a very much disrupt the system, but I think part of what Mark was saying is we do need to revolutionize the way that we currently operate. We've always thought the two-party system was the right way. And, maybe it's a good outline, but we've become too drunk. And by we, I mean elected leaders have become too drunk in power and in money that they forgot what they're intended to serve, which is the people. And until we stop seeing ourselves as a nation that other nations have to respond to as the United States and start to see ourselves as a nation amongst other nations, then we're going to continue to operate with these Western ideologies that ultimately are advancing one group of people and silencing another. And part of what I believe is the way is you mobilize people on the ground, and then you start to organize behind people that are ready to take money out of politics and serve the people. Santita, I shared with you before that I'm also managing the campaign of a gentleman running for the U.S. Senate seat. Mm-hmm. And he, one of my commitments in being his campaign manager was that I will only accept that responsibility under the notion that you do not accept any lobbying or PAC money.
And his name?
Nasser Beydoun. And he strictly accepted only grassroots donations. And what that does is it positions him to enter potentially into the U.S. Senate seat, not being beholden to anybody but the people. And I think that that's really important, is we need to start thinking about how we run campaigns. You have AIPAC that actually approached him and offered him $20 million to run against Rashida. And you have AIPAC that is currently positioning people to bring down Cori Bush and every other pro-Palestinian candidate. And so it's really trying to reevaluate what role money plays when it comes to electing politicians and how we're forcing politicians to be more beholden to special interests. Every time a bomb drops in Gaza, they're making money here in America.
Absolutely.
Through weapons manufacturing and stocks and all these different things. And so would just really, hopefully, any people that are listening to do your due diligence. We're hyper focused, like I said, on the presidential elections, but there is so much power in our House and our Senate, and really trying to ensure that we're organizing behind people that are ready to serve, the average person, and really keeping special interests and lobbying money out of politics.
You know, before you go, Dwight McKee is one of the founders of Operation Push. He's with the National Action Network, as I said, senior advisor to Dr. Cornel West. What would you like to say to Lexis Zaidan as she goes to campaign to get people involved? I mean, you're giving people an option, Lexis, and in this cycle where you've not had a race, it means so much. Dwight McKee.
Well, first, let me commend you on the brilliant strategy, Lexi. I think it's a good template for the Black community who's been taken for granted, as you all have been, for years. I think it's such an exercise in hubris to believe that you can bomb the cousins and the aunties and the uncles of a people, and then they'll line up behind you to vote for their own demise. That's such arrogance to me. Um, I would hope that you all would always can consider the possibilities of a third candidate, that the Democratic Party is not your only option, that there are other party candidates running whose values more reflect the values that I think many of the young people in the Arab community has. And so I would hope that you all will put that on the table. But I think it's a good point of reference for the Black community to say, hey, we ain't locked on the plantation. We can exercise other options.
Lexis, what would you like to say? Well, let me go around to everyone because I believe in giving words of encouragement. And I think what you're doing is so important. Ari, what would you like to say? Because I know you've got to go too. Deadlines.
Always deadlines, but I'm not sure that Lexis and the Uncommitted campaign need words of encouragement. I think they are showing the courage right there. They are showing, the possibility in this moment, and that's what I think is really what's causing so much momentum right now is possibility, and that idea is something that folks on the left have been wrestling with since before October 7th, but especially since October 7th, which is what are the possibilities here? How can we move forward here when everything seems so predetermined? And what the Uncommitted campaign is showing us is that it's not. It's not predetermined. There is possibility. There are cracks here. There are rooms to maneuver in multiple places. There are possibilities for uncommitted campaigns outside of Michigan right now as well. And, in this article that we ran, shortly after the uncommitted campaign was announced, that Iman Abdulhadi did an interview for, one of the things that folks said during this interview was that there was hope that this was going to spark elsewhere, and that people had been coming to Michigan, had been coming to the Uncommitted campaign in Michigan to say, hey, this is exciting. There's possibility here. Can we bring this to our state? Can we do this elsewhere? Can we do some version of this elsewhere? And so, I don't think, the Uncommitted campaign, needs, encouragement necessarily. It is the Uncommitted campaign that is encouraging all of us right now and showing all of us right now the possibility that's out there.
Lexis, I know you gotta go. I wanted you to hear from everybody, but
Yeah, I just want to say I appreciate it. I mean, Ari, that what you just shared, in a time where we're receiving a lot of hate, and I receive a lot of hate emails and a lot of hate messages. It's reaffirming to hear that, and Dwight, to hear, someone as a senior strategist such as yourself that's working with Dr. Cornel West, who I had the pleasure of meeting, and he's been writing very strong for our community and has been such a voice. I think what we're doing is exactly what you said, Ari. Is I shared the other day that if anything, what this does is it really inspires communities across the country to always know that there's a third way no matter what, and that they're gonna, and by they I mean the establishment is going to try to keep us down. They're going to try to divide us more. And the way that the Jewish community and the Black community and the Asian American community, just communities in general, have really rallied their support behind this, has given us the courage to keep going. And, I always, in business school, we call this a minimum viable product, is what feels safe to put out there because you never know what could happen. And you always just have to be willing to try. And I think this is what we're doing, and we're going to take it a day at a time. So I appreciate this platform, Santita. It's amazing, and you had such amazing people. And I wish I could stay longer, but campaign or
Yeah.
primary day is here, and so gotta continue to put the work in. And I hope this is not the last time I'm on a platform with each of you.
I'm gonna call you. I'm gonna call you tomorrow
Yeah.
about this because it's. I think Jonah, this is something that can that we can build upon, and that, quite frankly, that can spread. And I think that's what needs to happen. Lexus,
100%.
God
I'm
bless
a
you. Godspeed.
Thank you. And I'm a resource to anybody here. So Santita, if anybody would like my contact information, please pass it along.
May I connect everyone by text and email?
Sounds
Mhm.
good to me.
Let me do that because I think that you could benefit. Jonah is a brilliant young organizer. Ari, brilliant writer, executive editor of In These Times magazine. They're giving you incredible support. You have a brilliant resource, an attorney, Mark Fancher, who is there in Detroit. And
Nice.
and he is a brilliant civil libertarian, a brilliant lawyer. And Dwight McKee, of course, is here in Chicago. So, you know, we got your back.
Thank you so much. You all have a wonderful day and God bless you.
God
Oh,
bless you. God bless you. Jonah, what have you just heard here? I mean, because we've got the primary coming to Illinois. I mean, and we haven't had primaries in most places, and now you're talking
well,
about the and sending Ari much love. We're talking about people having the nomination wrapped up. We can see that that is not the case.
No, I think, I mean, the whole point, I'm trying, and I really, I really enjoy being on the show with Mark, because I know, I sense that we have different perspectives on our orientations towards and our hopes towards what the Democratic Party can be. My philosophy, and maybe I have to, and I always enjoy being challenged too, is that, we can, the left can wield enormous amount of power by putting pressure on the establishment and running our candidates inside the party. And we are 8 months from the election. We have a lot of time. We're 5 months from the convention, and Joe Biden is currently poised to be anointed as the nominee at a convention in Chicago, which of course the Chicago area has the largest Palestinian community in the country, and it's actually, you know, Joe Biden either has to change course, or the Democratic Party has to decide that they're going to put somebody forward that actually has respect for Palestinian human rights, because there's a growing movement of people that are going to make that an issue that they vote on, and that are going to demand justice, that are going to demand a ceasefire, and that are going to extend the values that they hold at home abroad. And so I think the Listen to Michigan campaign, I noticed it maybe 3 weeks ago online, had a couple hundred followers on Twitter, very small thing. And look at how quickly it's grown. Look at how on CNN yesterday, they have the governor of Michigan running damage control against it. Like that is a sign that it is being heard by the people in power, that they take it seriously. It's something like first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they attack you, then you win, they say. I don't know, one of those sayings. It feels like that this campaign has the potential to go through that cycle and spark, a chain reaction that I would hope would lead to, of course, change happens over time. It's not instantaneous. But I think this is a really, really important first step, and I'm excited to support and to see how other creative people of conscience around this country use their political power to demand that our country uphold Palestinian human and civil rights and stop supporting the genocide in Gaza.
Well, we've got so much history here, and you, you and Mark, why don't you all engage? I mean, where do you see some difference between your position and Mark's? And this is, look, a difference of opinion does not mean that we're no longer allies or friends. It's just, I see things differently. Why don't you and Mark engage? So what is it that you see that how do you think you see things differently from Mark, Jonah?
Yeah, well, I'll just preface by saying, of course, I'm a member of, if not now, Chicago. The opinions that I'll express here are mine, and they're speaking in my personal capacity. And there are lots of members around the country, and if not now, that have lots of different orientations towards this question. And as you said, we want to see the same kind of world at the end of the day. And I think that I continue to be in coalition and movement with those folks. So I'll just preface by saying that I think my current view of things is that, so for example, I'm very inspired by the Sunrise Movement, the youth climate movement that sprung up, really started to gain attention during the Trump years, that introduced and popularized the idea of the Green New Deal. And a group like the Justice Democrats, which ran a bunch of primary campaigns in safe Democratic seats against incumbents who were not progressive, who were corporate, bought out, not supporting the values that we cared about. They helped elect Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who then became a champion of the Green New Deal. We have to remember that the group in Congress that we now call the Squad, that is, of course, the conscience of our Congress, didn't exist 5 years ago. And they've wielded a tremendous amount of power. They wielded a tremendous amount of influence. The campaign of Bernie Sanders ended, and Joe Biden felt that in order to win the election and unify the party, he needed to create task forces with the Bernie Sanders people, including the Sunrise Movement and the Squad for the climate. And that shaped Joe Biden's climate plan. And what ended up passing Congress was a much, much more progressive climate bill that could reduce our emissions, cut them in half by 2030, just because of that movement and that orientation. That doesn't mean that we don't eye an eventual political revolution where we maybe eventually move beyond the system that we're in. But I think there are a lot of gains to be made, even within the party. I'm not ready to wholesale abandon it, but I will say that I've never felt so. I grew up. Maybe this part of this is my upbringing. I'm a young person. I grew up in a household where my parents always voted Democrat, still always vote Democrat. It was, very much kind of a vote blue, no matter who vibe, in part because the feeling was anyone will be better than the Republican. And it's really important for all the gains that we want to preserve to vote for the Democrat. And I will say that I have never felt so alienated from a Democratic nominee as I do from Joe Biden, as he continues to refuse to even consider conditioning, military aid to Israel. He released a little memo, but it's hardly anything. And so I think there are gains to be made by pushing the Democratic Party left, by running candidates in primaries, by fighting for that, and preserving that institution, which I think is important to the political power of the left. But I'm also conflicted about it, and I really respect hearing from Mark on this question too.
Mark Fancher?
Well, I think that a lot always depends upon perspective and from what vantage point you look at the Democratic Party. If you look at it solely from the perspective of someone who's focused on domestic issues and the health and well-being of people in this country, it is always possible to see what might be regarded objectively as some sort of progress. You might be able to see a reform here or a reform there that gives reason to believe that the Democratic Party can be a vehicle for bringing about significant change. But if you step back and you look at the party through the lens of the world, then you see a very different picture. What you see then is a party that has been bought and paid for by an oligarchy that controls not just the Democratic Party, but also the Republican Party, and that its objective is to dominate the planet. And it remains unseen, it remains unaccountable, it remains visible to no one but the oligarchy itself. But the people who can see it are the people who sit in positions of so-called power, but really may be positions of influence within government structures and within corporate structures. CEOs of major multinational corporations know who the oligarchy is. The President of the United States knows who it is. People who do the bidding of this group know who they are, and they know what their marching orders are. And in order to preserve that power that they have, the dominance and the hegemony that they exercise over the planet, they have to do some clever things from time to time to deceive people. And one of the things that they know that they always have to do is that they have to pacify a domestic population that can create some disruption and confusion in their standard operations and the way that they do business. And so over the course of time, they have had to take measures that from time to time make it look like makes it look to the people of the United States that they really are good people. But at the same time that they're doing things, maybe increasing wages here, uh, putting into place reforms in law enforcement there, somehow passing legislation that expands housing opportunities or other things. At the same time, they're creating total hell for people on the other side of the world. They're dropping bombs on them. They're starving them to death. They're herding them into camps. They're doing all kinds of things. And what's unique about this moment in history is that what they're doing in Gaza has been so visible, and that it's not been something that they've been able to hide.
Mm.
And so, but these things have been going on for a very long time. And the Vietnam War is a case in point where they absolutely devastated Southeast Asia. You can see what they've done on a smaller scale in places like Central America, where all kinds of wars raged, in El Salvador, in Nicaragua, and other places, where the CIA is engaged in all kinds of furious activity, causing incredible, horrific death on a massive scale. You can see what they've done in Africa, where they've devastated populations there, and they still do it through the use of proxies that are directed by US Africa Command, AFRICOM. And all of this stuff, these horrible things that are done around the world, are often done under Democratic Party administrations. Obama did it, President Johnson did it, Clinton did it. All of these guys have done these terrible, terrible things around the planet. And it's all for the purpose of preserving an oligarchy. And so I think that individuals have to make up their minds as to whether it's worth it to try and continue to work with an eye toward making reforms in the United States that are going to benefit people here, at the expense of, at the same time, causing death and destruction in other places around the world. And the thing to keep in mind, really, I think, is that it's not limited to just populations overseas. Kathleen Cleaver, who was a leader in the Black Panther Party, said once that the one thing that they never anticipated when they began their work was just how ruthless and how vicious the US government would act toward them. And the things that they did to the Panther Party are unspeakable, including the outright assassination in Chicago of Fred Hampton and Mark Clark in their beds while they slept, uh, filling that house with bullets, riddling their bodies, and then having Chicago police carry their bodies out, wearing these big wide grins as though they had succeeded in killing a deer or something. So that's what we have to, as individuals, make up our minds about. Do we want to be a part of that? Or do we, in the long march of history, want to start now to begin dismantling it? They can buy us off. They can try and pacify us. They can make us think that there's hope, that there's a reason for optimism. The question is, are we going to be deceived by all of that?
Jonah, I've only got about 3 minutes left in this segment, and everyone, please stay tuned. We're going to be talking about Israel and the price that they're paying for confronting Western imperialism. They are paying, but they're willing to do that. They said apartheid, we experienced it. We don't want anyone else to. 1 minute for you to respond, Jonah, and then for you, Dwight McKee.
Yeah, I guess I completely agree that the policies of U.S. imperialism and the war machine and the tremendous damage that our foreign policy over time has wreaked around the world, that historically has been a bipartisan consensus, and that's not okay with me, to be clear. But what I will say is, I don't know that it is. The Democratic Party is nothing except a group of voters and a group of interests that compete against each other for influence over elected officials that have decided to be in coalition. And, during the time of the Civil War, the Democratic Party was the pro-slavery party and the Republican Party was the anti-slavery party. And now, the relics of those who would, lost cause in the South, who would wish to go back to the Confederacy or view it as the War of Northern Aggression. Most of those people have realigned into the Republican Party. So those coalitions have shifted. I don't know that the problems are inherent to the party. What I do know is that we live in a two-party system where, at least right now, domestically speaking, the difference between a Democratic and a Republican administration, domestically speaking, could be very, very large. And that concerns me. I do worry about what could happen, and I don't support death and destruction around the world. But I think that, and I hold out hope that the coalition of voters that elect Democrats, who I think by and large are an anti-war coalition of voters, they just have not been organized and activated to make that a condition of the support for the candidates that they are putting forward. If this becomes more of an issue, that Democratic primary voters are demanding that their values be respected on, that I would hope that we can see changes and that there can be an additional realignment. But if it's not possible within the two-party system, and maybe the jury's out on that, and maybe then we do have to demand international solidarity and an end to the war machine. And I'm with Mark on that for sure.
And confront the oligarchy. Stay tuned for the second hour. Talk about confronting the oligarchy. That is what South Africa has done. Stay right here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, and the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Join this conversation with the Santita Jackson Morning Stars. Back in a moment. Is South Africa paying a price for taking Israel to the ICJ, for confronting, ultimately, Western imperialism? Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes.